It seems like you guys, in particular, are the insurance policy.
Yeah, I mean, what you're doing is buying our mistakes. You know, we've been in this business long enough to have made a lot of mistakes. They're never happy when you make them, but you hopefully learn from them and take away and never make them again. And, you know, a small mistake in a large grow can be very expensive. And, you know, we just want to minimize that.
So we were talking about valuations being unrealistic.
Yeah, so one of the things that we really try to do when we work with companies, particularly as it relates to investments or looking at acquisitions or helping companies in that way, is really try to create a better level of understanding of valuations in the marketplace. Because one of the things that we suffer from right now is as they say, irrational exuberance in the market. There are companies that have crazy valuations, or even worse, think they should have crazy valuations that really have nothing to substantiate that. And so what that ends up doing is it really creates a disparity in the market between companies that should have the value that they're supposed to, and those companies that believe they're worth $500 million on $1 million worth of revenue. And we have to bring a level of reality to that. Otherwise, I think it does a disservice to the market as a whole.
Absolutely. Are we seeing a time where people are going to start to get rational and real about this, and it's going to get into a point where, or is that still further out than we can see?
I mean, feel free to comment on this. I think it's still further out at this point. I mean, you've got, for example, the Canadian market. I guarantee you, if you walk the floor tomorrow and you talk to 100 companies, at least 25 to 30% of them will tell you that they're going to go public on the Canadian market in the next year. I'd be willing to make that a bet, in fact, for $1.
but I'm afraid I'll agree with you. So,
so I think that there's a lot of irrational exuberance in the Canadian markets, and I think that there also is a lot of unknown, right? So while flower may be $6,000 a pound in Massachusetts still, and so people are building businesses around that, and they're making pro formas that predict $6,000 a pound for the next 3 or 4 years. In Colorado, it's $800, $900 a pound. So the markets are a little bit out of whack with one another because we're doing things on a state-by-state basis. So I think it's going to be a while before we see a real leveling off and a parity across all markets.
Interstate commerce would solve that, wouldn't it?
Interstate commerce would probably be a reality check for a lot of people. I mean,
it would blow up a lot of business models, I think.
That's really where the harsh reality is going to come in, is, with what you were saying about the overvaluated businesses. They have these competitive markets right now where you can't get any more licenses, which is great. And the people who hold these licenses, they have very valuable businesses right now. They can demand high prices for their product. That's all well and good while those borders stand. And, nobody knows how long that's going to be the case, but once you can produce it in Nebraska or in California and outdoors or in a very large and cost-effective greenhouse, these businesses that were purpose-built as warehouses to compete with 10 other people in an entire state, they're not going to bode very well.
Well, I'll actually do you one better than that. I'd say that it'll happen even before interstate commerce, because what's going to happen in these small, tightly controlled markets is they're going to get into it, and they're all conservative, and we're going to clamp down these licenses. There's only going to be 10 of them. Right. And they're going to say, like, okay, the sky didn't fall, things are okay. Boy, we can make a lot more tax revenue if we have more licenses and we have more production, and it begins to grow right within that market as regulations change.
Yeah, if a business has got 10 other competitors in the state and they're valuated at $50 million, what happens when they allow 10 more?
I think the problem is the valuation, right, as you were saying there, because you could adjust for competitive pressure if you haven't built a fat business model. If you have a really fat business model because you had too much money. I know too many guys had dispensaries that, when they suddenly had a few more costs and had to pay taxes and things, that, you can't do as much for your employees anymore, and people don't like that as much, and it's hard to change your corporate culture.
The tax, 280E is one of the things that I think it surprises me how few business owners really either understand or know about 280E or are actually paying those taxes appropriately. And I think that could potentially come back to smack some people too.
Oh, that's bad news.
Yeah.
I've still got friends that are in jail for tax evasion.
Well, I love, when people ask me about the market and, where things are going, and I love to talk about 280E because it's one of the most ironic tax regs in the world, that the IRS came up with a tax regulation to tax illegal entities so they could still get their money out of them.
Right.
That is funny.
Not everybody knows about that, so please, would you explain 280E to our audience?
Sure. So 280E is a tax code that the IRS came up with to be able to tax illegal businesses. And so basically what that's saying is that we know you're an illegal business, but you still have to pay your taxes to the U.S. government. But in order to do that, we're going to restrict you from taking any of the deductions that any other normal business would. So in many cases, particularly for a dispensary where there's not a lot of cost of goods sold they can build into their taxes,
Right.
They're ending up paying, in some cases, 60% effective tax rates, which is significant. So all of these, stories about, people making tons of money on cannabis, the truth is it's either going back into the businesses to grow them or it's going towards taxes.
Right. There was a day, a few years back, where everybody I knew in the business was driving new trucks and smiling a lot, and getting plenty for their stuff, and their stores had lines.
There was a day when every plant was a toy. You'd look at that plant and say, that's a snowmobile, that's a dirt bike, that's a new bicycle, but not anymore.
Nope.
Now that's $6,
Right.
and you better not mess it up.
And that's part of what, as this grows up, right? Getting a business model that's lean and, aggressive and can be competitive and get your valuations right so you're not strung out on your cash and you're able to survive. And then you get your process right. Oh, well, that almost sounds like a, real
You almost got a business there.
Yeah. And, a few years ago, that wasn't actually possible. But right now today, somebody with half a brain and a pocket full of money could come talk to you guys and make it happen.
We'd love them to do that. We'd love to help them.
That's the hope, yeah. But it's actually the evolution of that has been really lightning fast in the overall big picture of things. It's only been 5 years since 2014 when cannabis was legalized in Colorado. So, but the industry has grown up really rapidly, and you're seeing smarter people getting in. You're seeing companies like Next Big Crop that can, really dial in good processes and business plans and model things out for companies, and so it's becoming a real industry.
It is, and you guys are leaders in it. I'm really pleased that you can make the time to talk with us today. Now,
well, we're very busy.
I understand that. I know you guys are. Believe me, with the people that want to work
We're very
with
important people.
You are. So, as a takeaway, what would you want to tell our audience about cannabis business and if they're thinking about getting into it?
I want to hear Rich's wisdom.
Okay. If you're thinking about getting into it, I would say you cannot underestimate it, and you can't look at it with 2014 eyes. You have to look at it with 2020, 2025 eyes, and you really have to know that the market today, or the market in 5 years, is not going to look anything like the way the market looks today. The margins or the costs that you have to produce at now are nothing like what you're going to have to produce at in a few years, and it has to be taken seriously, and you have to look at it on this more global perspective, that you're not just in Massachusetts and there's nobody else around you. You have to plan for a couple years down the road when these prices are going to drop. How are you going to stay competitive? And that's really my takeaway, is not to be a fear monger, but it takes a lot of preparation, it takes a lot of capital, and the general rule of thumb is twice as much and twice as long. And
that's true with everything I've
and
ever worked with.
that tends to be the case, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I would say my takeaway is I'd augment that a little bit by saying you have to have one foot in the present and one foot in the future, in the sense that the consumer today, the industry today, is one thing that you have to focus on, because that's where your revenue is going to be derived. Right. So if you're, for example, in Colorado, the majority of cannabis is consumed by about 15% of consumers, but the consumer of the future, the one who we're building for and who we're creating products for, that's going to help grow that market overall, is a different consumer. So you have to be able to serve both. Right? You can't exclusively, there's so many brands and products that come in and say, well, we're going to be the high-end lifestyle cannabis product, and that's great, because that might be the cannabis of 5 or 10 years from now. But the cannabis of today is a core consumer who primarily consumes flower, who is into concentrates. So you have to be able to understand who I'm serving today, but who I also want to build for in the future, and that's a big challenge. It's tough to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for coming and talking with us, and it was a real pleasure.
Our pleasure.
Pleasure's ours.
Thanks
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take it easy, yeehaw.
And a yeehaw. Thank you.